Okay. All right, we'll call the meeting to order. Welcome everybody here this morning. And I'm going to ask, is there any declaration of pecuniary interest or the general nature thereof from anyone? Seeing none. That's good. If it does arise, it certainly can be declared at any time. Krista, you have us online. If there's anybody joining us online other than the deputy mayor, can you give us the ideas?
Thank you, and through you, Mayor Eccles. Before I begin, if at any point you get disconnected, you can dial 1-647-558-0588 and enter the ID for this meeting, which is 891-5626-2480. Both members of council and staff have been briefed on the various features of the Zoom meeting software and will be raising their hands physically to speak. For members of the public, if you require any technical assistance, please send a chat message to West Gray Communications and I will attempt to assist you. It should be noted for members of the public that this meeting is taking place across 2 meeting platforms, both on Zoom as well as being live streamed on YouTube. Public participation, if any, must be done through Zoom and cannot be done through YouTube at this time.
Thank you, Ms. Langdon. Okay, that brings us down. Meeting today is, we have a presentation from Marianne Love, and she is joining us virtually, I understand. And okay. Ms. Love, are you hiding somewhere on screen? There you are.
I'm here. Sorry, I was just waiting to be let in. I'm right here.
You are there.
I am.
Welcome this morning, Marianne. If I can use your first name.
Yes, you can. Thank you.
And you have a presentation for us this morning on the compensation review that you've been working on. And I'm going to turn the floor over to you.
Awesome. That's great. Well, thanks. I just need to be enabled to share the screen. If the clerk could open that up for me.
So Marianne, we're going to share your presentation for you. So if you could just let us know
Perfect.
when to advance, that will work.
Well, I won't say no to that. Thank you very much for that. So for sure, that's great. If you put it up, I'll take it away. And through the mayor, I'm more than happy to take questions as we go through, or you can hold to the end. I'll just follow your lead.
Well, we'll probably use them as we continue on because I'm getting to the stage where I might not remember what the question was by the time I get to the end. So
that's just fine.
Thank you for that, Marianne.
Okay. All right. So first of all, thanks very much for allowing me to attend this morning, and I'm pleased to present the results of the 2024 compensation review. And I have a few slides here, and the intent of the slides is just to give council a sense of the approach, the process, and then the results. Okay, so I'll take the next slide, please. So this is a background slide. So this gets us a sense of where we've come from. So the last review that was conducted for the municipality was in 2020. This review included some key component parts. We reviewed internal equity, pay equity compliance, and we also took a look at the competitive pay market. Now, the output of that review produced a salary grid with job rates, and job rates mean maximum pay rate, so the maximum pay rate in the grid, all right, that reflected the 50th percentile of a selected comparator group. Now, that's your salary grid that was produced in that review, of course, has been adjusted annually to account for cost of living increases. And your maximum rate or your job rate in your grid framework is set at step 5, and there's 4% step differentials between each of the steps to get there. The job evaluation system was introduced at West Gray in 2020. It's been used since 2020 to support internal equity and pay equity compliance. I was retained this year to conduct a review of your current program, specifically to assess the competitive pay market, your current pay practice, or your percentile target, and in the context of an evolving pay market. and also to update pay equity compliance and develop proposed job rates for implementation in your next budget cycle 2025. I'll take the next one. In terms of overview of the project, the current information for all of the positions was provided. I completed a custom market study using 13 comparator organizations. These municipal comparators were selected having regard to defined criteria. We took a look at some of those comparators we used in the past, certainly the geographic placement of West Grey in the province, and measures of size and scope of service. I reviewed the evaluation ratings for all of our positions and wanted to make sure that any changes in job content were reflected in the updated grid. Your current banding framework, the banding framework is, as I described, your step framework and the left-hand side of the grid that holds the positions. I tested that to ensure that that framework would continue to support organization growth and the design of the positions. Coming out of this review, because all of the work was done in 24, I prepared job rates or maximum pay rates that were aligned with the pay market. I tested for pay equity compliance, then put another framework together for 2024, and then understanding we need to move that forward into the 2025 budget cycle. So that would need a COLA adjustment to get it into 25. I'll take the next slide. So this slide talks a little bit about our approach at West Grey to compensation. The top part of this slide talks about the principles. I've carried those forward into the next slide, so I'll just focus on the bottom part of this slide for a minute. Your program at West Grey consists of the elements that you see here. Each one of these elements was considered in the review. There was a focus on the competitive pay market, but all elements were important and were duly considered. We always take a look initially at the current job information, step one. Make sure that all jobs are fairly and objectively evaluated and placed in the compensation framework through job evaluation. That's step two. And then making sure we don't have any pay gaps and we continue to be compliant with the Ontario pay equity legislation. Steps 1, 2, and 3 are all internal to West Grey. And step 4 is when we take a look at the external pay market. And step 5 is when we put together the competitive job rates and prepare the revised salary grid. Each one of these elements, as I said, was discussed or considered in the review and probed in the review, just as they were in the 2020 review. Each one of these steps or elements deals with the position and not the person. Right? The person, the employee, very important. Performance management programs will provide metrics in terms of how our employees move through the grid. This is to structure the grid itself. The other thing I would say is this compensation review focused on the cash elements of compensation. We did not look at benefits. That wasn't within the scope. We didn't look at other ancillary pay practices. So the cash part of your compensation program is very important. It isn't the only thing that's important, right? There are other elements of total rewards that are very important, as well as organizational culture, leadership, and things of that nature. Okay, but this was the review here was focusing on the cash. Okay, so we'll take a look at the next slide, please. So this is the slide that talks a little bit more about our compensation principles at West Grey. We can say we are a fair, we have embraced the principle of fairness, and we do that through internal equity, when we can say we've evaluated all of our jobs and placed them in pay bands of similar value. When a job's in a pay band with other jobs, it doesn't mean it's the same job, but it's similar enough to be placed in that band, and those jobs then move across to achieve a common job rate through a step framework. We can say we stand for the principle of compliance, the key piece of legislation we need to be mindful of as an Ontario employer in compensation is the Ontario Pay Equity Act. We can demonstrate that we've achieved and maintained pay equity compliance when we have an analysis that ensures there are no pay gaps for female-dominated job classes when they are compared to male job classes of similar value. We can say we embrace the principle of competitiveness when we periodically, as we did in 2020, as we did in 2024, go out and test the competitive pay market to ensure that we are able to attract the key staff and retain those folks by achieving a competitive percentile relative to the pay market. We say we embrace the principle of pay for performance when it is that we have a program whereby an employee will move one step on the salary grid annually based on performance metrics. And we can also underscore the principles of sustainability renewal through a number of considerations or lenses. Certainly council will take into account compensation through budget and consider budget implications and projections, workforce projections, workforce planning. Sustainability is also supported through the use of best practice tools, systems, and renewal processes. And we introduced those in the last review. We've continued to use those tools and systems. And this review is evidence of a renewal process where we've gone back out in the 4-year cycle to take a look and see how the competitive pay market has positioned itself, and also what are the impacts to West Grey and what things should we be considering. Okay, so I'll take
Marianne, could I ask a question right here?
Sure.
The first two, fairness, the internal equity, the pay equity, the way the act is, the scoring, and pay for performance. I get that. The competitiveness, the one that's always bothered me. We're scoring our jobs and have our band. And that's very much objective. That the center one there, the competitiveness, always in my mind. Can you get to me how that is objective and not subjective? To the point we're comparing 13 other comparators. How do we know that they are scoring their jobs in that same objective way that we are, and forming their grid in the same objective way? Or is it just a subjectiveness that they have?
Well, it's for the most part, I would say our comparators all have some sort of job evaluation program, and in some of them I actually do that work. But that's not the essence of a competitiveness comparison. When we are looking at the competitiveness, what we're looking at is our pay rates, and we're comparing our pay rates for our positions at West Grey to the pay rates of the comparator organizations' positions where they are similar enough to be compared. So it's a comparison on pay. Each organization, as you mentioned, has their own obligations, their own tools and systems, but we're not matching the value of the job, we're matching the pay. We're matching the job itself and then comparing pay.
Exactly.
Yeah. So where it is,
The companies,
yeah,
the companies that have put in that pay grid, because I have seen it in years past. Experience tells me, yeah, we've had that. And then the corporation themselves, oh, we'll just adjust it to this, this, and this. And wondered, 5 years later, how we got it so far out of whack.
Right.
And that competitiveness is the one that scares me the most in this.
Well, I will break down a little bit when I get to this part of the presentation of how it is that I approach the ability to be able to say we're competitive or not competitive, and maybe that might help address it. But your point is a very good one, in that we don't know how the other comparators derive their pay rates. We don't know that. We just know what they are because we see that data. So therefore, however they got there, this is what they pay for a comparable position at West Grey. That's what we compete with. We may have better pay practices than the bulk of the comparators, or they may be on par, but that wasn't the essence of the analysis. It was just, what are they paying and what does that mean to us? And then we consider that as we put together our updated program. But I will go into, a few slides down through this presentation, a little bit around the methodology that I use to come to a conclusion, if that helps.
Yeah, that'll be fine. Thank you.
Okay. I think I covered everything on this slide. Is there any other questions, or are there any follow-ons? If not, okay, we'll go to the executive summary then. Okay, thanks. So ensuring our employees are paid fairly and competitively is a requisite for effective service delivery. Now, broadly speaking, given the limited resources in municipalities and challenges, limited resources on the whole of municipalities and challenges in attraction retention, this has impacted our pay market. We have staff and positions that are specialized, technical, and at a management level, and this is impacting, I think, how the competitive pay market information is presenting. It's really due to the economy in relation to compensation. The 55th percentile is what I'm recommending coming through this review as being representative and progressive, having regard to the scope, the size, and the composition of the 2024 comparator group in relation to the municipality of West Grey, and having regard to the fact that we are in and have been in an evolving pay market. On aggregate, so on the whole, we're paying below the current target of the 50th percentile of the defined group. So we've had 4 years lapse, right? Now, having said that, some of our positions are closer to that target than others. And this is exactly what we'd expect to see in an evolving pay market. So we have this opportunity through this review to do a bit of an update or a reset to get all of our positions up to a defined goal. The current banding framework, so the left-hand side of your grid, can support the organization design and the placement of your positions based on the content of the jobs, internal equity measures, and the defined market. The updated framework that I've prepared addresses internal equity for all of our positions. All of our positions at West Grey are placed in pay bands using a consistent interpretation and application of the job evaluation system. We have pay equity compliance because all of our female job classes will have a job rate equal to the male comparator rate. And the framework also addresses a pay practice with job rates or maximum pay rates that are reflective of a 55th percentile target. I'll take the next slide. So these next few slides just drill down on some of the component parts of the review. So I've made reference to internal equity and pay equity compliance. I've also made reference to the fact that we have a current 12-factor job evaluation system. This system produces the current banding framework and the positions within that framework on the left-hand side of the grid. It consists of 17 bands. Each band will hold similar value positions. This banding framework then is the backbone of the salary grid. So as I said, all of the positions were reviewed, job evaluation ratings were updated, 2 positions moved in band placement. This was supported by job information and the competitive pay market. Pay equity compliance was reviewed. There are no pay equity adjustments required because all female job classes have been positioned, and coming through this review will have pay equity or job rates that are equal to the male comparator job rate. I'll take the next slide. Now I'm going to talk a little bit more in depth around the market review. So here are these slides that I was referencing. So we always start with selecting a group of comparators. So we define our criteria for selection. So we like to select organizations with, be mindful of geographic location. That's also often indicative of economic conditions in that sort of broader regional area. We like to compare to organizations with similar service alignment and like services, because this is all done on a position match. Metrics of size are important. So there's lots of things to look at for size: budgets, population, tax-based service size, and also having regard to some of the comparators we would have used in the past, because we did this 4 years ago. So all in, we've got 13 comparators, and they are here on slide. We've got Blue Mountains, Brockton, Chatsworth, Clearview, Georgian Bluffs, Grey Highlands, Guelph, Ramasa, Hanover, Meaford, Minto, North Perth, Springwater, Wellington North. I believe we had sourced initially 15, but 13 participated. And I think it was Southgate and Collingwood that we didn't get the data for. Additional pay data was also sourced from Tay and Brighton for the library positions, because not all of these organizations would have library data to share with us. Some of them are in a county library system. Okay, so I'll take the next slide. So again, in terms of the methodology now, so what I would be doing and what I did was I matched the West grade positions to similar positions in comparator organizations. I take a look at what the comparator organization's job title is, job information relating to that position if I have it. In some cases I do because I've done similar work for that comparator. Always looking at their organization charts, which gives a sense of the positioning and the structure. And we matched our maximum rate of pay for the West grade position to the maximum rate of pay that's offered by the comparator for that matched position. We match our maximum annual and hourly rates to their maximum annual and hourly rates. So it's an apples to apples comparison. Now, how it is that their jobs come to be paid those rates is unique to that comparator organization. But what we know is this, that's the amount of money that they offer. That's what we compete with or against, or what we need to be mindful of as we put together our compensation frameworks. Okay. I've always applied a conservative approach in job matching and remove outlier matches so that the results are reliable, the results are not skewed. Where it is that I'm able to get 3 or more matches for a West grade position, I'm able to calculate market competitiveness using various percentile values. We use percentile targets in compensation to help define relative placement to the defined pay market. So if it is that, for example, I'm able to produce 10 matches for a position, I can rank order those matches, highest paid match to the lowest paid match in the comparator group. And I'm able to then determine what the 50th percentile of that group is. The 50th percentile would be the dollar rate in that ranking of 10 matches, where 50% of the wage rates in those comparator groups are above and 50% are below. 50th percentile is the median. All right, so if we're targeting just slightly higher, the 55th percentile in that ranking of 10 would be the dollar rate where 55% of the wage rates are below and 45 are above. So it's just a slightly higher value. Okay, and of course, the same would hold true if we're targeting a higher target, like say the 60th or whatever. But this is how we more sort of measure. It's a method of measuring the competitiveness and how we place to the comparator group. We get a better sense of that than we would if we averaged those 10 values together, because it doesn't really give us a sense of how we rank or place. Okay, so we'll take to the next one. This again, just breaking down some of the comparison data. So if it were that, as it was, I was able to sort of take a look at all of our jobs. I was able to compare our annual salary rates, maximum rates, and our hourly maximum rates to the comparators. When we did that, on the whole, for the jobs I was able to match, we were about 7% below the 50th percentile target. And therefore, of course, if we're looking at higher targets amongst the comparators, it would stand to reason that the gaps would be a little larger. Now you see 2 rows of numbers there. The numbers are different for annual job rate comparisons and hourly, and this is because we have comparators in municipalities that use different hours of work for their positions. So we'd like to look at both data sets. This is why we don't have common numbers across both rows. So, but on the whole, the annual job rate is like that comparison line is pretty instructive, particularly for the management roles. As we move down through the organization, many times for frontline positions, the hourly job rates are more instructive. So again, it's collecting the data, analyzing the data, and then producing the results.
Marianne, I was just inquiring, you mentioned that the annual and the hourly could differ because of the hours of work. What's the average hours that most of these comparators would base their employees at? Like, I know West Gray's 35, but what's the common hourly?
It's a great question. The common practice is typically 35 hours and 40 hours. 40 hours for more the frontline positions that are required to do the work predominantly you'll see in roads and operation type positions. And that's common in the sector, very common with our comparators. But the odd comparator will pop up with a 40-hour work week all the way through, which is 2080 hours annual. The odd comparator will use 37 and a half, which is 1950 annual hours. So we take them as we find them, right? And we just take a look at the data and see what that means for us, right? But I think we and Westway Gray follow more of what I would say is the common trend that I see more prevalent in the sector in terms of our use of annual hours. Okay. They'll just continue on. Yeah. Okay. So when you see these numbers up top, we do not address the situation by, for example, applying 7% to our grid and say that, hey, now we're competitive. Because we have some positions that are closer to the pay market than others. All right. We have some positions that are further away than that 7%. And that's not surprising because there's been a lot of volatility in the sector. It just means that are we above on the whole, or are we below on the whole? It just means after 4 years, we're below on the whole. So then we have to sort of go down and go a little deeper, okay? We are less competitive when we're comparing our maximum pay rates for our mid-level or senior level management positions. This is in keeping with market observations for many municipalities across the province, and this is given the challenges to attract and retain talent. This has been going on for a number of years, pre-COVID, through COVID, coming out of COVID. It has largely to do with the aging demographic in the municipal sector, right, and the ability to access early retirement provisions, right, without penalty through the pension plan. This challenge is experienced, as they say, sector-wide. The job rates for 95% of our match positions are below the current target. Now, as I said earlier, some are closer to the pay target than others. Some are 3% away, and then we have others that are 18.9% below. So this is the churn. This is what's happened with some positions. Some positions in the sector have really been challenged in some of the pay markets, and so this is impacting pay. What we can say is on the whole today, on today's snapshot, we have an inequity in competitive pay throughout our own employee group, and we have an opportunity then to provide some redress to that coming through the project. Okay, I'll take the next slide.
Got a question for you, Marianne.
Sure.
Go ahead, Joyce.
Thank you. When you're doing your market comparativeness, there's benefits, pensions, and so on and so forth. Would that factor into kind of the overall market value when, I don't know what other municipalities offer their employees. So are those sorts of things factored in when you're doing these evaluations?
No, we didn't take into account the ancillary pay, but we just made the assumption, and I think it's a fair, broad-based assumption. First of all of our comparators are OMERS employers. So therefore, we don't need to account for that. We just take that off the table. All of our comparators provide health and dental benefits of some sort. So we haven't gone deeply into that. Now, we could do a benefits analysis at a later date to see whether or not your benefits are competitive, but this is just taking into account the pay rates that are showing on their grids, on their salary grids, and comparing to the maximum, their maximum rates comparing to our maximum rates on ours. So it's an apples to apples. Okay.
Okay, one more, Marianne.
Sure.
Hi, Marianne. So we had a target percentile, current percentile target of 50th percentile, which was established in 2020, I believe you said. And you're saying that we are now 7% off of achieving that. So we've sort of drifted 7% away from that that target. Can you explain how we got to be that far away from the target?
Well, that is a wonderful question because I'm going to speak to that right on the slide. So it's like you were with me when I prepared. Thank you very much for the question. So that is the prevailing question, isn't it? So why is it we are where we are, right? So one of the reasons is our last review was done in 2020. So you might say, well, yeah, that was only 4 years ago. But I have to say, there are folks that have done, first of all, their cycles are tighter even than 4 years. I have a few municipalities that are 2 to 3 years. 3 years seems to be in this type market a norm. So it's one extra year. A lot of things happen in a year, 1 year. All right. So we do what's best for your organization, but we just have to be mindful of what's going on around us. It's a very factual to say we are in an evolving pay market. Many of our comparators have completed a salary review since 2020. So that's in the last 3 to 4 years. All right. And when they do that, they adjust their own salary grids. They do what's best for them. When it is they're doing their reviews, they will and have many of them revisited their own compensation practice and strategy. And they will look at a new comparator pool, slightly adjusted comparator pool, and or they've increased their own target market percentile to achieve the competitive rates that are best for them. So drilling down a little further, 5 of our 13 comparators that I know of have adopted a pay target at the 55th percentile or higher. Pay targets range from the 55th to the 60th amongst this group in terms of those that I know of. 4 comparators completed a compensation review that I know of in 2023. So that right there demarks change. So, and it could be, I haven't said it on the slide, that some of our comparators have used perhaps higher annual adjustments than we have. Not saying we've done anything untoward, but the market just presents in a certain way. And this is not unusual. I have a very similar slide and I've used it for probably 30 to 35 reviews for other municipalities this year. And that's probably a low number, right? It's just they present differently. I don't have the same numbers in it, but it's the same message. It's and the response could be, as a counselor or a member of council, it seems like we're always playing catch up and chasing the tail of another municipality. And there's some truth to be said to that. But I think the response must be, we have to know what's going on amongst our comparator group. We have to position West Grey to be equitable, compliant, and competitive. And how best do we do that? So I think one of the best ways to do that is to consider going to a slightly higher percentile target. It's in line with what's going on in the sector. It's sitting on a relatively conservative bank of comparators. We have not stacked that comparator group. We have different numbers if we're bringing in large employers, and we haven't been. So the comparator group, I think, is represented, right?
Oh,
Right. Is there a question?
no, you
No.
just disappeared there for a second.
Oh, did I? I'm here.
Yep,
See?
we
Okay.
can hear you now.
Awesome, good. So I'm going to move to the next slide. And I think, well, first of all, before I go, I was wondering if maybe I addressed the question on that slide. Is that okay? In terms of how
It's interesting that you kind of addressed the question, but sort of in the opposite way that I think you might have intended to. You're saying that the 55th percentile would make us a competitive employer. But you're also saying that 8 out of the 13 comparators are using something below the 55th percentile. So I'm curious, how are those 8 using something like the 50th percentile? Is there anyone that uses below the 50th percentile? And how does us sort of aligning ourselves with 5 of the 13 make us sort of a responsible spender and competitive at the same time?
So to address the question, these are only 5 that I know of. There could be more that have adopted a 55th percentile or higher. That would mean those that haven't would have the 50th. I don't know of any of them that would have had below the 50th. Okay, I would hazard a guess that they're all at least at the 50th percentile, those that I haven't quantified here. In terms of determining what's best for West Grey, and again, what I should say is maybe back up from that. All this is saying is there's a trend. That's all this slide is saying is there is a trend to move to higher percentile targets. That's factual. I've experienced it with my work across the province. In the end, each organization determines what's best for them based on ability to pay, some of the strategic considerations that, important, like what it is you need to do in order to ensure you've got the talent you need to provide the services. These are the same considerations each one of our comparators will address when they do their own work. Each one of these comparators are going to have a different pool than yourselves. So our 55th percentile target at West Grey is going to have a different number than the 55th percentile target of say Grey Highlands. It's a different number because Grey Highlands didn't use the same comparators. So it's just a measure of your own comparator group. So again, it comes down in the end to what is the gap? How much is it going to cost the organization to redress the gap? And where do you want to go with those outputs? All right. So I would say this is only reflective of a trend. The other thing I would say is most notable is that 4 of our comparators that I know of have completed a review last year. So they're bringing forward their competitive rates into 24, and that was the 24 data that we used. This is what shows our gaps by what's going on within our own group. Okay. So
thank you for that. Thank you for that. You say that there's a trend towards adopting something like the 55th percentile. And yet you indicate that 5 out of 13 of the comparators have done that. I thought in the last review 4 years ago, you indicated a higher number of our comparators were adopting the 55th percentile. It seems to me like the trend is moving away from that based on your previous report and this report.
Well, thanks for the question. We have a different set of comparators. So we don't have the same. We have some of our historic comparators and we have some new ones. So it's not necessarily an apples to apples alignment. All right. And again, I wouldn't hold fast on the 5. These are just 5 that I know of. There could be more. But, again, I would say the trend on moving higher is, yes, we see what I know of with regards to the comparator group. I'd say the trend in terms of moving higher is just my own sort of experience in terms of doing the reviews that I've done this year, last year, and is compared to say 4 or 5 years ago. There seems to be a movement higher, and this is just in response to the evolving pay market.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks for the question. They've been good questions. So maybe try another slide here. Okay, so now we're into the pay target recommendations. So I'm recommending that the council consider establishing or adopting a pay grid that's with the maximum pay rates that are reflective of the 55th percentile. This has regard to the size and scope of the comparator group. I don't believe it's benched quite nicely with the criteria. We don't have any one comparator that's skewing job information or job matches high. I've always apply a conservative approach to job matching. Again, not just skew results high to make sure that the positions the matches are reliable. The attraction and retention challenges in your organization and where it is how it is you want to position your compensation to ensure you're able to staff up to deliver your services. I think that's really well answered, best answered by your CIO and your senior staff. All right. But I can say that across the province, it's a very, very tight market. So this is, again, evidence through the churn in terms of the activity. Certainly your geographic placement in the province and who you would be competing with. And certainly we've talked about the last two bullets, the evolving pay practice in the comparator group and the economic conditions and external influencers within sort of the broader regional area. I think this is reflective of a progressive approach. Again, compensation needs to have strategy built around it. The strategy informs the percentile target and the pay structure. It will align your job rates or your maximum pay rates with an evolving and competitive pay market. And I think this can be supported by adopting a 3 to 4 year review cycle. I'm not saying you do another review in 3 years, but it's something that your CIO can consider and say, are we good? Are we able to then move this into a 4-year review? If the answer is yes, then that's what you do. You do what you have to do. But moving into adopting a 5-year review cycle, I think what happens then is there are big swings in the compensation, and that's very difficult to support and accommodate fiscally. So the 3 to 4 year review cycle has evolved to a best practice. And you folks have done that because we did our 2020 review. All right. Our results would likely have been different had we done this review last year. We've done it in year 4. That's fine. And here we are. I think that the pay target that I've recommended will align with the competitive pay rates for positions in your employee group and achieve equity amongst that group when comparing to the defined pay market. What I mean by that, this is allowing us to do a reset to get all of our positions in and around that competitive space. I'll take the next slide, please. So again, back to the build, how we put this together. I understand we're into 24, but all the work has been done this year. So I needed to prepare a salary grid framework for positions using maximum pay rates that are reflective of the percentile target. And of course, build a framework to get there. That framework consists of 5 steps, 4% between each step. This is the same framework that I had put in 4 years ago. It just needs to be reset. Okay. Now, of course, the framework itself needs to be adjusted to account for an economic adjustment in 25. So the recommendation, I think this is coming up through budget, is 1.9%. Now that's conservative based on, I think what your comparators are putting in, based on what I've seen across province. In many cases, it's upwards to say 3%. But, coming in on a robust reset framework, I think 1.9% is reasonable. We have to try and, again, put this together in with multiple considerations to get a new platform to move forward. Now, moving forward to implementation, staff have prepared an implementation costing that will place all of our positions on the new grid. And this is considering a step-to-step approach. All right. Now, staff have done that costing and can better reflect on the cost. I don't have them embedded in this report. The approach reflects equity and consistency. It will also support retention and sustainability. We take the next slide. So in terms of going forward, I'm recommending that the municipality adopt a pay practice of targeting the 55th percentile. And that West Grey implement the proposed salary grid effective Jan 1, 2025. I'm also recommending that the municipality adopt the following pay practices, in some cases continue what you have going. So the first one is to adopt or continue, I would say, because of evidence of our cycle here, adopt the pay practice of undertaking a periodic review of all of your positions on a 3 to 4 year cycle. This ensures competitive pay practices. It also ensures that we continue to be equitable, we continue to be compliant, because we don't want to lose sight of those 2 key principles either. And this is in light of changing demographics and work practices in the municipal sector. The 3 to 4 year cycle has become a best practice, as I said earlier. It ensures we're not going to overpay or underpay when we apply those annual adjustments for COLA. It also ensures that we get our compensation program, principles, comparators, the whole thing into council once a term. I'm also recommending your annual increases to the group be determined by conducting a review of comparator organizations to determine an average of the comparator projected increases. This is where averages can come into play. So in around this time of the year, you have a pretty good sense of what your comparators are budgeting. And you certainly know when you come through the chute in January where that's at. If you can kind of keep up with that, it kind of gives you a sense we're kind of lining up. If there's, for whatever reason, an inability to do that, and this happens, it happens because council has many, many things to consider in the operating and capital budget consideration, the operating budget specifically, as it relates to this item. So council has to make choices. So it's just providing information so we understand consequence or implications of choice. That's all. So what our comparators are doing together with other data sources, such as information relating to the CPI increases, those are known in good numbers are known in October and November. You get a pretty good sense of what the and year-over-year increase is. And also anything that's locally negotiated. This will inform the appropriate salary grid adjustment in any 1 year. And this will give you a pretty good leg up on maintaining your a sustainable framework. And also, of course, this is what we want to continue to do is to continue to evaluate our positions and reflect changes between the cycles. And this is another reason why we don't have a huge swing on the costing. So we have I have, when positions come over to me, if they're new or changed, I'm able to evaluate them and place them effectively on the left-hand side of the grid. And if we did that only once every 4 years, again, large swings. So it's a good way to sort of moderate cost implications based on the value of the work. Okay. Also, we want to review our compliance annually, and that's just making sure we have no pay gaps on the gender basis. I'll take the next one.
That's the last slide, Marianne.
Oh, well, thanks, God. I was hoping there wasn't another one. Thank you very much. Okay. Any other questions through you, the mayor, that I could address or support?
Well, I see at least one hand up here, so Councillor Hutchison, Doug?
Thank you, Marianne, for your presentation. Just a thought, do we ever do a comparison to the public sector? Sorry, the private sector, in terms of wages? Is that something that you look at all?
We can. I don't often, and part of the reason being is it's very difficult to obtain good local comparator data. Many times in the private sector, that data is proprietary, right? So they don't like to divulge it, but where it's provided, I can look at it. I have looked sometimes, where it's available at published private sector data. The challenge is on the position match. So as we move up through the ladder chart, it's very difficult, for example, to match, I'll just pick a job, the treasurer with a controller in a company. There are statutory obligations on that treasurer job in municipal government that just make those positions non-comparable. So there are some jobs, however, that we can get a good run on. All right, and some of those might be, maybe a financial analyst, or it could be an operator if we can get the data. But it's very difficult to obtain. And of course, then too, and this goes to one of the counselors at the table, question around: are we looking at ancillary pay, benefits, pension? Well, amongst our comparator group with municipals, I think it's safe to say we don't need to, because they've all got that. In the private sector, they don't have a defined benefit pension plan. I can pretty much guarantee that. They certainly wouldn't have OMERS because they wouldn't be able to participate in OMERS. So right off the mark, it's a difficult comparison, and many times in the private sector, there's opportunities for variable pay, which we don't have. So it's a great question. If the data in these compensation reviews is provided, right? Sometimes I'm able to get it when I'm working with a local municipality. I'll certainly run a comparison. It's a good indicator, but it's hard to rely on. Okay.
Okay, thank you. So, yeah, it's an interesting question. I might throw that out to our CEO at a later discussion about whether they see that happening in terms of not being competitive at the private level. Yeah, another question. Maybe a statement. First of all, I think part of the issue that we deal with now, and some people even put their whole campaign on the fact that wages are not keeping up with inflation in terms of right now, and it's coming through a pandemic. There seems to be a lot of issues with that. But my question, another question I have regarding that is why why are you picking 55%? Like, what about 51 or 52 or 54? Is there some reason it's 55?
Well, it's a great question through the mayor. It's just a matter of practice. Typically, percentile targets run on a run of 5% increments because again, it's just a target. And when you think about it, if we're targeting the 55th percentile, does that mean every single job will be spot on with that target? That's not possible. And why? Because it's a general statement. We'll have jobs, let's say we had 6 jobs in a pay band of similar value. We can only have one maximum rate for those jobs. So some of those jobs will be spot on the 55th number. Some might be a little lower based on their market matches. Some could be a little higher. But what it does is it allows us to reset in and around the target. And so when you're dealing with that concept, it kind of makes sense. You're dealing with aggregates of, or increments of 5 points on the percentile, if that helps.
Anyone else? Jeff, go ahead, please.
Thanks. The first question, I have a couple. When you analyzed the job content, did you move current employees from one pay band to another very much? Was there a lot of that went on?
Well, through the mayor, there's only 2. Just
Pardon
2
me?
positions, only 2 positions moved. And
So
I think, yeah, up the ladder chart on the left-hand side due to reevaluation based on job content.
So they had a job that was described 4 years ago with the job description and, whatever in a pay band, and they were, stuck in that pay band. And something happened over the last 4 years that what was expected of them changed. And so they got bumped up into a different pay band. How does that sort of thing happen? How do people's job description become more sophisticated and more demanding such that they need to be given a promotion?
Right.
Is that done intentionally or is it done by certain, happenstance?
Well, typically through the mayor, it's typically done with a direct intent on the allocation of the responsibilities to the role. What happens in a relatively small, compared to other size municipalities, is that we have many jobs that do many things. And we have evolving service. So it's not uncommon for a bit more to be added and sometimes removed, but it's mostly added duties. And sometimes those positions may come in directly to me for review, and sometimes they're just, it's incremental creep. So when you have an opportunity to take a snapshot, you get to do a deeper dive and identify some jobs through the evaluation process that needed to be moved. Right. And as I said earlier, if we didn't do this on a sort of a maintenance basis in between cycles, we would have had more than 2. Just happens to be we had 2 identified. It also happens to be that the 2 that were identified, the movement in the band on the left-hand side also was supported by the external pay market. It was pushing those jobs up high as well. So when you do these cyclical reviews, you get to see all those pieces and then put it back together.
Is it customary as part of the retention practice to try to seek to move people up the grid? Like someone's been here doing a job for 8 years, they're doing a great job, and the CAO or their direct manager or director might say, we want to see you in a job with more responsibility. We're going to promote you up the ladder, and you now have more responsibilities. Is that common practice?
Well, it is common practice, but it's only if the job content allows for that. So some organizations, if they can, will build a bit of a succession or a resource strategy where they may put in a senior role And then, and then build the job content so that, and that supports a van movement upwards. But just because, and then maybe perhaps the individual rolls into that position. You know, but just because an individual is at the maximum of their pay band doesn't mean automatically they go up another band up. So they may be at the maximum of the steps, if I to use better language. The position itself cannot move up the left-hand side of the grid unless the job duties change or the qualifications change, and it goes through the job evaluation system to warrant the point allocation to get it up there. But yes, organizations, savvy ones, are really looking at job design, the way of the work, making sure job content is written, you know, in a way that's meaningful, and then making sure the job evaluation system is working for the organization. And I have to say, you know, since 2020, I have received jobs to review. So it's not that it was dormant. It just means, hey, we've got opportunities. There's a change in leadership. We've got, you know, things are moving. Your organization is the same in 24 as it was in 20, right? So we just have an opportunity to look at it more holistically on a cyclical review. And that's what we found too.
So you have been asked in the intervening 4 years to weigh in on some job shifting decisions. We currently do not have a dedicated HR person. If we had, and I don't know who I'm asking this question to, if we had a dedicated HR person, would that be the sort of thing we would be doing internally?
You could do that if the individual is trained on the application of a job evaluation system. And you could bring that in-house for them to review. I would have to say that many times I'm still doing job evaluation maintenance for organizations that have full HR shops, full HR resourcing. And the reason why I'm doing them is to provide the expertise and objectivity to support the ban movement. But it's not to say that it couldn't be done. I expect there'll be your CAO will be probably building a role profile and saying these are the things that need to be done. Where there is an HR resource, that HR resource and the CIO can be direct drives on these outputs. If it were that I would be to continue, and if I wasn't going to continue, I just make sure they were effectively trained.
Okay, thank you. A question for the Director of Finance. This P55, the 55 percentile target, is going to have, as proposed here, is going to have an impact on the budget. Are you able to estimate what that impact would be? Sorry.
Sorry. Yes, through you, Mayor. Yeah, in the CAO's report, we did provide an estimate with using the P55 and a 1.9% cost of living adjustment. The net addition that we don't have in our base budget was another $66,381 over our, originally we were budgeting about $355,209. So that would be, we would need that another 66 based on from our base budget for presentation at our last budget meeting. That answers the question.
So to follow up, this is the P55 plus 1.9. We were budgeting 3.1, weren't we? Cost of living, sorry? 3.3, a cost of living adjustment, were we not?
We were budgeting a net impact of the grid and trying to anticipate what a grid adjustment, not just steps along the grid, a cost of living adjustment plus a market check. So we were budgeting, trying to estimate the net impact of it.
And yet this is doing $66,000 increase more than what we were budgeting.
Yeah.
Okay.
Correct.
I feel like we've possibly fallen behind because we have not consistently kept up with cost of living adjustment. There was, I know, 1 year in the last 4 years of budget cycling that we gave an increase that was substantially less than the cost of living CIP, the index. So it's possible that we've fallen behind that way, and that I think we should probably have to catch up. Personally, I feel that the P55 is a kind of a strange target to aim for, because it's sort of saying we want to be better than the average. And if everyone said they wanted to be better than the average, that's an impossible target, because then the average would just skyrocket. How I do feel that we have been remiss in keeping up with cost of living adjustment. So I sort of feel we have some catching up to do. And maybe this is the place and time to do it. If we adopt the P55 recommendation, that's a one-time change to the grid for the next 4 years until the next review. Is that right? It doesn't have an impact other than cost of living on a year-by-year basis.
Correct. And then it's just as employees, if they move up until they hit job rate.
Right.
But, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, go ahead, Tom. Your hand up there.
Thank you, Mayor Eccles, and through you to the Director of Finance. I think just a follow-up from what Councillor Shea was saying there. I guess my question is, I think the year that we didn't do the increase was the year that we implemented the increase on, I believe that's how it worked. I just wanted to confirm that's what we did, but I think we've been staying status quo.
I can double check. I think that might have been the year that we did it, but I'd have to double check for sure on which year it was, but that might have been the implementation year, maybe. But I'd have to go back and check.
Okay, well, thank you. I just kind of, I thought, I didn't think we had missed a year, but I think it was the last time we did the same process through Marion. And then what we did is we didn't do the increase because we had got back into the grid up to date. And I think that's, but every year since, I believe we've been staying as close as we could. So I think the market's just moving too quick for us to stay on top of it. That's how I feel about it. Thank you.
Just wanted to throw something out. Gary, February of this year, cost of living increase, CPI, COLA, 6.5%. October, we're at 2%, give or take. And I think that has a big factor in, because if I'm not mistaken, Westgrade is usually used the October number for what it is. And on a yearly basis, you can see anywhere from 4 to 5 percentage points difference. So if 3 or 4 of the comparators use April or February, instead of all using the same one, now you're getting that variance. And I wouldn't be hesitant to say that the 7% on the 50th percentile, it probably ended up a lot to do with what number you use on COLA. Because Marianne, I don't see any other way on a 4-year basis that's going to be, unless you jump in again and go, oh, we've got to make a one-time adjustment too, and or decide that you're going to move up to the 55th percentile. So everybody on a 4-year basis, a 3-year basis, whatever it is that they're looking, the change is usually just because of COLA. You don't go beyond that to flip your grid. So it's, in my mind, when you're using the COLA or CPI index as to where the percentages get out of whack. Is that fair? Am I interpreting that in my little mind
Yeah,
correctly?
well, I think it's a consideration. I think it's one of the key considerations. You're right. There are many municipalities that don't use CPI. They would align with maybe what their comparators are using. They might align with what they've negotiated locally with a bargaining unit. So not everyone is using the same metric and therefore not the same number. But if it is that however you derive at your COLA increase, if it hasn't aligned on track with the comparators and we missed a year or we went low on a year, that's definitely going to have an impact. That's factual. So I think the observation is bang on. The other thing that has happened, and I know what's happened, is that in addition to the COLA adjustments amongst the comparator group, many of our comparators have done reviews. So when they do reviews, they do a reset on the framework and continue to apply COLA. So it just goes to show, again, it supports why it is we are a bit gapped here. So, it's a matter of then trying to recognize that and figure out what's best for you folks in terms of moving forward.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else have any comments for Mary Ann? Questions? Jeff, jump in.
This may be more for the CAO or the clerk or treasurer. The question I have is about
Don't
retention.
forget Krista.
Yes,
One
Krista.
more person in this room.
Krista, if you could answer this one. It's a question for the CAO, but you haven't been here that long. And the question is, how are we doing in terms of retention? Is our grid placement and everything impacting negatively on staff currently?
Thank you through the chair to council. We have had, and I've been asking about what our loss of staff has been over the last 18 months when I haven't been here. We have lost, and we have been told it's in part because of wages. To Councillor Hutchinson's point, we've actually lost, I think, 3 people to the private sector who are paying more than we are, is my understanding. Anecdotally, I am hearing that staff are constantly looking at comparator wages, and we hear it all the time. And I get sent little clippets. Oh, here's a job that is being advertised in a competitor municipality that is paying more than we are. I think to Mary Ann's point, the benefit that we have is we have a very strong corporate culture here, but that only buys you so much time. And my personal feeling is that at the end of the day, our employees are our most important assets, and I want to make sure that we treat them fairly and competitively. Hasn't been huge, but if you've watched what's even going on in our administrative area, there's been a lot of churn. Not all of that is to go to other jobs, but we have had that. So, and I'll let our treasurer and clerk who have been here longer, they may have more to add.
Yeah, I think you've covered it. We have, there's been in the last 2 years, probably 3, just in our admin office, that have gone, not just private sector, but to the public sector as well. 3, probably 4 building department, yeah, just in our office here.
But we have also been able to attract very dynamic, positive, forward-thinking employees as well. A couple of or more who might be in the room at this moment. So it seems to me that while we may be losing some in a competitive job market, we are also apparently able to attract people away from other municipalities. I would think that our wage grid must speak to that to some extent.
If I may, I would suggest that it's perhaps not the wage grid. I think a lot of it has to do with corporate culture, people coming from perhaps other municipalities. so it's that combination, as Mary Ann said, it's not just the wages, but at some point, we've also lost a fairly high level position here directly related to pay grid as well. So it's a tricky balance. You know, you look at lifestyle, people, where they're living, what they want to do. Certainly we know, especially in this post-COVID market as well, we are not, as much as we have our 15 identified comparator group, we got results from 13. We are also competing for many positions that can be done remotely now with employers in Toronto or London, Ontario, because if you can sit on a computer and work remotely and review planning applications, et cetera. So it's a very strange dynamic right now. So, you know, we've got to consider that even in, you know, how we deal with our remote operations and stuff. So there's a mixture, and I don't disagree. We've attracted some very good talent, and I'm looking at some in the room. So it's the mix. I don't want us to fall behind on this. So whether it's 50th or 55th percentile, I still want to make sure we're valuing the people who do the tremendous work every day.
Joyce.
I think too, and getting back to like the benefits in that, I think sometimes too, I wonder, like, somebody's wage might be a little bit less, but maybe they offer more through a benefits plan, which especially with the young families today is crucial. You know, that you need those for dentist appointments or for a construction worker, like their spouses or whatever, you know, for extra medical needs for a chiropractor or massage, whatever. So I think that has an influence too on an employee's retention within a municipality as well, like those extras that are offered over and above the wages.
Michelle?
Thank you. While it wasn't part of Mary Ann's work, when I solicited this data from our comparators, I did ask some of them to fill out a little chart. Could you give me a little bit of information on what your policy is regarding remote work, how many sick days you have? Anecdotally, and I haven't done a full-blown analysis on that yet, I would say we are competitive or slightly less than competitive on the benefit side of things.
Okay. Doug.
I just have a question with the grid. It says proposed salary grid P55. Yet in the chart, it talks about the 224 job rate, and then on the right-hand side is proposed salary grid 2024. I thought we were talking 2025. Thought what we're looking at is going forward. This is what we're proposing for 2025, but it seems to say 2024.
Gary?
Yeah.
Through you, Mayor. So the grid that is in your package is the 2024. That has not been adjusted for COLA. So what I've done when I've calculated that $66,000 difference is add in 1.9% on this grid that you see there. That would make it a 2025 grid. So this is without a COLA adjustment. This is just an existing grid.
Is this taking into consideration the 55th percentile then? It is, but not the COLA. Okay.
Michelle?
And if I can just clarify that, because I had the same question when it first came through. On the left, on the white section, the 2024 job rate is what we're currently paying. The proposed salary grid, as Carrie said, does not include COLA, but that's based on the new proposed rates. If you recall, Mary Ann said that her new proposed grid was based on, because she was doing her analysis in 2024. So it's based on 2024 adjusted numbers, not including COLA. If that's clear as mud.
Okay, Jeff?
Just to make sure I got that straight. So the green grid on the right, we would look at those numbers and in our heads add 1.9% to that. And that's what the pay rate would actually be.
Jamie?
Through Miracles, we do have a P55 grid that shows the 1.9% COLA that we can bring up on the screen if that's helpful for council.
Krista? Okay, anything else? Before we get down into anything else for Mary Ann? The sun's shining out there. I know she wants to get outside and go through some other numbers today.
Oh, of course, of course. No, I'm happy to answer any other questions, or I can leave you now and you can work through the rest of your deliberations. Whatever you like. Okay. Any more questions for me?
It's always a public meeting. Everybody's willing, is welcome. But if there is no other questions, you're free to sit in and follow the conversation for sure, Mary Ann, but
I'll leave you now unless you want, because I've got a barking dog and I really apologize for that, but I will, if you wanted me to pop back in, Michelle, I can do that.
okay, yep.
Bye-bye.
Again, thank you very much for your work.
Thanks for having me. Thank you.
Okay. So if there is obviously nothing else there. We do have a staff report. We've kind of bounced into that and bounced out of it, but we'll go to that part right now. Michelle? Report's here.
Thank you. So the report substantially just reiterates what Mary Ann has suggested. And we put forward a proposed motion. We would like council to consider adopting this proposed salary grid moving forward for implementation in 2025 and defer to council on at what percentile target you would prefer. And I did not state in the motion, but our clerk has sent me a revised motion identifying as well where we should identify what the COLA is. And at this point, staff are recommending the 1.9% COLA, which is consistent with the CPI rates as of September.
Okay. Any questions before I ask somebody to move the recommendation? Go ahead, Doug.
So given this additional 66,000 to our operation budget, what is our percentage coming at the starting point of budget deliberations? It was 7.3. So this is going to bump it up over 8, I would think.
7.9.
$7.76. That would be about another 0.46 of a percent. Yeah.
Joyce?
But just for clarification, the initial, that 7.2 for administration was a 3.3% increase. That's not even reflecting it on this grid. Like, when we were doing budgets, I thought that you had mentioned that part of that 7-point-some% increase was a cost of living of 3.3%. Cost of living index, and that wouldn't even reflect then on this grid?
So the original base budget included step movement for employees not at job rate, a cost of living increase, and an estimate for what this market would look like. So that was an increase of $355,000. That was all in. So if we did a 55% market, now that we know what those are, if we add a 1.9% cost of living on that, that's where we need another 66,000. If we implement a 55, we were estimating what the market would result would be, and we were a bit low on that.
So I think the 3.3 is that's the all-in number. It wasn't the grid adjustment number. That 3.3 was, that 350,000. That was 3.3. That was part of the 7.3. 3.3 of that was wage adjustments and whatnot, not cost of living.
And not just
Right.
cost of living, it was
Yeah.
sort of encompassing an estimate for stepping, market, and cost of living all in. But we were a little bit low on the market estimate. If we implement a 55 percentile.
Any other questions on the report? Tom, go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor Eccles. I don't have a question, but if you're looking for somebody to move the recommendation, then I would certainly put the motion forward to do so.
What do you have for us there? Jamie?
Through Miracles to Deputy Mayor Hutchison, are you moving it with the 55th percentile? Just for clarity, I'm not sure what you're. Yes, okay, so that in consideration of staff report West Grey 2024 compensation review and the presentation provided by ML Consulting, Council approves the 2025 salary framework as presented with job breaks reflecting the 55th percentile pay target with a 1.9% cost of living adjustment effective January 1st, 2025.
That's the one that you're going to move, Tom? Thank you. Do we have a seconder for that? Councillor Shea, Jeff? Any further discussion on that motion? This might be a loaded question, Madam Treasurer. To stay at the difference between the 50 and the 55%, we're talking percentages. What am I reading in the grid? It's somewhere 1,000. What would the average individual get between that 50 to 55? $1,000, $1,500, top of the grid, somewhere around 5 to 6, bottom of the grid, 500. Yeah, the dollar value instead of the percentage value, I guess is what is what I'm asking.
So it ranges, like if you go to the bottom of the grid, with the 1.9% COLA in there, the difference at the bottom, if at market rate, job rate, 2308 versus 2298, you're looking at 10 cents versus at the top of the grid at job rate, would be 550. So it ranges between that would be the hourly rate.
Okay.
If everyone, like at the job rate, not to say that everyone's at job rate.
Right. Second question is, I don't quite get how Community and Corporate Initiatives Officer and the Environmental Capital Projects Officer, one's at 1820 and one's at 2080. There's a couple of those in there. In group 10, it's the same thing. Communications coordinators at 10 or 1820, yet the legislative coordinators at 2080. Well, it might not be, but go to group 10. Go to group 10. Planning technician, 1820. Legislative coordinator, 2080. That's on the grid that we were given.
I see, so sorry, you're looking at the green, 1820. So that is just referring to, if you look over 3 columns to the left, that would show what the position actually is, whether it's an 1820 or a 2080. When we look at that column in the green, the shaded column, that's just showing, okay, here's the hourly rate. And then what the sample salary would be if the position was an 1820 position or if the position was a 2080, but it doesn't necessarily relate to that line across. It's just giving the example of what those salary ranges would be
Okay.
based on that. But the actual position, if you look over,
Is on the
shows
left-hand side there. Yeah.
1820 on the left. Yep.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. That exits that confusion for me. Thank you. Councillor Hutchison, Doug?
Yeah, so I have a question too with the sort of band 9. I'm looking at, they say, example, payroll specialist. So the 2024 job rate was 64. And so on the right-hand side, they proposed salary grid 55%. So if they, depending on where they are in the steps, like, so if we go to the 55%, are they going to start out at step 1, which is 65? Or are they going to jump, if they're presumably at the top end of their pay grid, are they going to jump to 76? So they're going to go from 64,000 to 76,000.
Again, Doug?
Yeah.
You're looking at the wrong. Payroll specialist is 1820. So you go onto that list,
Oh, yeah, and then-
1820.
Yeah,
So
that's,
it would be, if they're at job rate, it's 66.8, not 64. So it's, yeah.
well, those numbers you're talking about, there are the hours, the annual hours, right? The 1820 versus 2080.
Correct.
Right.
Yeah. So you've got to look at the left-hand side, which will tell you what they are actually in, whether it's 2080 or 1820.
Yeah.
And then the
okay.
green side, the shaded would give you, if they're at 1820, this is where it is. If they're at 2080, this is where it is. You can't use those lines across.
Yeah, okay, okay. Yeah, because the same with the rural lead hand and the utility lead hand.
Yeah.
It's higher on the left and then on the right is lower again, so
If you
because of
follow the
20
line across, but
Yeah, okay,
you can't follow the lines. Yeah.
right.
You
Okay,
can't get here from there.
all right.
Go ahead, Carrie.
Yeah.
The hourly rate in any given band remains the same. So when you're looking at those 1820 or 2080, that's just the math times the same hourly rate for anybody in that band. So they would 35.25 at job rate would become 36.74.
Mhm.
And then it's just a matter of annualizing it is
Okay.
where the difference is, but otherwise the job rate's the same, whether it's an 1820 job or a 2080 job. If you're looking at comparing an hour
Okay.
on that
okay.
hourly rate.
All right. So we just needed an hourly rate column in there and then it would have cleared that up. Yeah. Okay. Okay, thank you.
Any other questions before I call the question on the motion that's on the floor? Call the question then. Do you want to read that motion again? Just before, Jamie?
Certainly, through your Mayor Eccles, that in consideration of staff report West Grade 2024 compensation review and the presentation provided by ML Consulting, council approves the 2025 salary framework as presented with job rates reflecting the 50th percentile pay target with a 1.9% cost of living adjustment effective January 1, 2025.
Okay, everybody clear? Call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? That is carried. Further comments, Joyce?
So just for clarity then, so they go to their step closest to their current wage starting January 1, and then if they're not at the top of their grid, then they'd get the other increase then in July.
The way we've looked at implementing the grid as recommended by Mary Ann is step per step. So if they're at job rate, they're at job rate. If they're at step two, they're at step two, and then would progress along the grid on July 1st to step 3. So it's like for like as far as positioning on the grid. I think that's the
Is it possible to make a recommendation that we do this exercise again in 4 years and not 3? Or do we just wait till then?
Jamie?
Through Mayor Eccles to Councillor Shay, yes, you could make a motion that this exercise be conducted once every 4 years if you wanted to.
I would like to do that. Okay. Second on that, Doug? Yep. And then comment on the motion.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea. And the thing I like about this is it's halfway through the term rather than doing it. If you do 3 years and every once in a while you're going to be looking at this when a new council comes in. I think that's difficult when you just come into the job and then all of a sudden you got to work on pay increases and so on. So I think by doing it every 4 years, you're going to be in the middle of the term, which is not a bad place to be. So, thanks.
Very good. And we certainly wouldn't want to make more work for consultants by going to a 3-year portion. Sorry, I couldn't resist. I tried. I tried.
Just go away.
And I go back to it, if on a municipal world, we all tried to use that same yearly increase, the grids would stay where they're supposed to be. They wouldn't get out of whack unless somebody pulled a number out of the sky and said, oh no, we're going to do this, which does happen. But that's a debate for another day on how to get to that coordinated bargaining between municipal services. Yeah. Yes. And how the municipalities have evolved as well too, whether they stay to be or comparative. If I could be as bold to say, I'm not certain that the municipality of West Grey is close to the town of the Blue Mountains and or as Marianne had said, one of the other comparators that didn't jump in was Collingwood. Wow. But it is what it is. Michelle?
Thank you. And if I just may speak to that, when we looked at the 13 comparators that provided data, there were a few of them that were ridiculously out of sync with the others within the group. And when Mary Ann did her analysis, she pulled those from her averaging. You heard her mention, you know, sometimes I use 10. So there were some, and I won't name who they are, who pay considerably more. They're in a completely different, even though geographically they may be in the same market and population wise, they may be in the same market. On a, they just pay way more. So we pulled those from the average because we thought that just skews things ridiculously. So there was some subjectivity in that as well that we discussed so that we weren't coming in really out of whack.
I was glad to know that the bottom three that are way, way down there below West Grey, they were left in. I jest to anybody out there. Sorry, Krista. All right. Motion's been moved and seconded this to maintain on a 4-year review cycle. Any other discussion? Call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? That one's carried. All right. Where are we now? Amy? Oh, we need a confirming bylaw for today. I guess that means we're getting down close to the end of this. Excellent. Do I have a mover and a seconder to confirm the bylaw of the actions today? Moved by Councillor Hutchison, seconded by Councillor Noon. Thank you, Doug and Joyce. Any questions on that? Call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? That is carried. Thank you, everyone, for today. And with all actions completed, I'll call the meeting adjourned at 10:39. Well, I've moved my clock back twice. Okay, we'll go 11:30.